Have you ever considered the person of Jesus Christ from an emotional point of view? To just realize that Jesus had feelings, just like you and I. And ever taken a moment when reading the Gospels to just stop and try to feel what Jesus was feeling at any given moment? I think one of the challenges to reading the Bible is that we read it in whatever mood we happen to be in at the moment. We don't read it in the feeling of the people that are in it. We read black print on white paper. And we don't really deep dive into what someone is feeling at that precise moment. The fear, the anger, the frustration, the discouragement, the depression, the love, the happiness, the joy. We just read it, feeling maybe nothing. Truth be told, maybe we're bored sometimes when reading about David and Goliath or the disciples on the storm at sea. We don't feel what they're feeling. It's interesting to read the Gospels, and when the Scriptures mention it, to just pause and try to think, now how would I feel at that moment? Sometimes Jesus seems so patient. You know what it's like to be patient? Sometimes it's not easy. We have to really work at being patient. At other times, Christ will become angry with the religious leaders. I mean, what was he feeling when he said, "You brood of vipers," or "You whitewashed sepulchres"? He had to be feeling something. And I don't know, I kind of impose on that. He was cranked. He was really upset. And I try to stop and think, man, what was that like to see Jesus angry? Sometimes he seems to be so full of compassion. And I try to think, what causes me to be compassionate, and how do I feel when I feel compassion? But at the next moment, he'll turn around and rebuke somebody in the strongest of terms. I think of him saying to the Apostle Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me." I mean, that must have had some edge to it when he said that. What was he feeling when he said that? And what was Peter feeling when he heard that? I mean, that must have stung. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Never have I been called Satan. And then let's kick it up a notch. You ever consider how Jesus might feel toward you? Just try to project an emotion upon Jesus right now and what he might be feeling toward you. You ever think he feels disappointed in you? I sure have. You ever think he feels angry with you or frustrated with you? Do you think he's feeling anything at this very moment toward you? As you sit here, never having given this question maybe any thought at all, just for a minute, what could Jesus be feeling toward you right now? Do you think he's feeling compassion toward you? Patience toward you? A little bit of frustration toward you? What would cause Christ to be moved with compassion? What makes him get that inner gut sensation of compassion? What could you go through that would cause Christ to exercise compassion toward you? 11 times in the New American Standard, which is the translation that I use, 11 times in this translation, they translate the Greek word splagnizomai by the word compassion. That may be my favorite Greek word of all. It just rolls off the tongue. Splagnidzomai. Dwayne, you should get some t-shirts made up. I go to Sussex Bibles, I'm full of splagnidzomai. There's an icebreaker right there. Compassion. What is compassion? What prompts compassion? How do you handle compassion? Do you have compassion? I like Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition. Listen to this definition. Compassion is sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. That is such a great definition. I just want to take it slowly, kind of one or two words at a time. First off, it's sympathetic consciousness. So I'm not just aware of your situation, I'm aware and I feel something toward you. I'm sympathetic. I have sympathy, not pity so much, but I certainly am moved toward you. It's a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress. So you're going through something. You're depressed, you're discouraged, you're hungry, you're out of work. You're estranged from your children. You're going through a divorce. You just lost a parent or a loved one. And so you've got distress. And I have a sympathetic consciousness of your distress together with a desire to alleviate it. So I don't just feel bad for you, I want to help you. And if I could, I would. If I could get you the needed money, I'd get it. If I could cure the disease, I'd cure it. If I could get that child back, I'd go talk to him and say, listen, you need to go talk to your folks, man. If I could help put that marriage back together, I'd say, let's start meeting. Let's see if we can't kind of work through this issue that you folks are having. Often there's nothing I can do. It's just beyond my ability. But if I could, I would. Let me write you a check. I can afford it. I'm good friends with him. I'll put in a good word for you. My place isn't hiring right now, but you know what? I know a guy. And I'll see if he can get you in, get you a job. So it's a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress. I know what you're going through, together with a desire to alleviate it. If I could, I would. It's interesting that of the dozens of people in the four Gospels, this word compassion is only used either by Jesus or about Jesus. I find that interesting because there are so many people in the Bible. There's the disciples, there's Mary, there's Lazarus, there's kings and rulers and Pharisees and Sadducees. There's dozens of people in the Bible, but the only person that compassion is ever mentioned with is Jesus. I don't know why. I don't think he was the only person to be compassionate, but at least in the first three Gospels, he's the only one mentioned as being compassionate or teaching about compassion. Of those 12 or so times, let me just share a few. From Matthew chapter 9, Jesus was going through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. And here comes our word. Seeing the people, he felt compassion. That's all one word in the Greek. That's from our Greek word. He felt compassion for them, and here's the purpose clause, because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. So he sees this crowd. They got a lot going on. They're kind of a mess, and Jesus feels compassion for them. Now, when Jesus heard that John the Baptist, had been beheaded, Jesus withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and here's our word, splagnidzomai. He felt compassion for them and healed their sick. And then the last one we'll look at, and a leper came to Jesus beseeching him. Falling on his knees before him, he said, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." And here's our word, moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand, touched him, and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." So Christ responds with compassion toward people who are greatly troubled, be it physically, mentally, emotionally. If they're going through a difficult time, it seems like Christ feels compassion for them. This doesn't surprise us, those of us that know Jesus at any degree. We would expect Jesus of all people to feel compassion for the downcast and those that are in great distress. That's who he is. But as I say, those are just 3 out of almost a dozen times that Jesus is described as feeling compassion. And I want us to look at one more this morning, and this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time, in Mark chapter 8, because this example I want us to look at this morning is one that, at least to me, comes as something of a surprise. Because it doesn't seem like that big a deal to me. Oh, it's important, but it's not like dying or having leprosy. In fact, some of you have been in this situation this morning. Truth be told, there could be someone here this morning who is in this situation this morning. And you don't even realize that Christ feels compassion for what you're going through right now. Look with me at Mark chapter 8. And I just want to begin by reading the first 3 verses. And you'll see our word right there. You're ready for it now. And here it comes. Mark chapter 8, beginning in verse 1. In those days, when there was again a large crowd, and they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, there it is. There's our splagnidzomai. I feel compassion for the people. But notice the purpose clause this time. Because they have remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. No one is dying. No one is sick. No one is suffering paralysis. No one has leprosy. No one seems scared or depressed. All the conditions we would expect Christ to be compassionate. These people are simply tired and hungry. And yet, for that situation, Jesus responds by feeling compassion. I think that's remarkable. Being tired and hungry, man, I mean, that's pretty common. Some of you are here this morning tired and hungry. And you would never think that because of that, Christ feels compassion. But he does. It's right there. I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they'll faint. They're going to pass out. And some of them have come from a great distance. So here's this group of people. Maybe they brought some food with them earlier, but now they've gone 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. They've gone through what they had. Others maybe hadn't planned anything. They were just planning to follow Christ for a day. They got so wrapped up with what he was doing, what he was saying, that time slipped by. Happens all the time. And so after a while, you start hearing that phrase that is perhaps the most common phrase in all of human history. You hungry? Man, I'm getting hungry. When is the last time we had something to eat? I don't know. What's today? Has it been that long? I mean, now we say it after about an hour, but these people, they've been out there for days on end, and all of a sudden they're really getting hungry. And I want you to notice a couple of things in these first few verses that aren't really spelled out in the text, but they're certainly there. I'm impressed by the devotion of these people. These people have been with Jesus for 3 days and nights, and they've been so interested in what he's doing that they forgot to eat. Wouldn't it be great to have that kind of a relationship with Jesus Christ? Where you're so wrapped up with what you're doing with him and for him that you forget to eat? I'll tell you, if that ever happens to you, you've probably found your ministry. Head down that path. If you're doing something on behalf of the kingdom and you realize it's 5 o'clock already and you still haven't eaten anything, you're on to something. That might be a spirit-led ministry for you. And second, I want you to notice the concern and love that Christ has just for humanity in general. These aren't obedient, spiritually mature believers. These are people more like me. There's average people, clueless people. I mean, there's a lot of people here. Mark will tell us in verse 9 that there's 4,000 people there, but Matthew tells us that it's just 4,000 men. So there's also the women and the children. So I don't know how many people, 9,000, 10,000 people? I mean, you ever been in a crowd? That's huge. That's a lot of people. Men, women, children, all shapes, sizes, personality, attitudes, and all with their own motive for being there. Maybe some of them were there because they were genuinely interested in knowing Christ. Maybe. But let's be honest, a lot of people were there for less noble reasons than that. Some were there probably out of curiosity. They'd heard about this guy and they just wanted to check him out, see if he's cracked up to be. Others were there just out of curiosity. They've heard about him. Let's see what he does. And knowing humanity and knowing crowds, some were there because everybody else was there. And they're just going along with the crowd. And yet Christ doesn't make all of those distinctions. And I love that about him. He just sort of lumps them all together and says, I feel compassion for the people. That's a great way to look at humanity without making too many distinctions. And if I send them away, they'll faint. And so his disciples answer him in verse 4, where will anyone be able to find enough bread here in this desolate place to satisfy these people? And he was asking them, well, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. And so Mark describes this place as desolate in my translation. Other translations use words like deserted or destitute or desolate. So as far as you can see, there is nothing. These people are at the end of their rope. They are beyond help. 5, 6, 7,000 people, and not a one of them has any solution to the problem. This is beyond their human capability to resolve. They've got nothing, they see nothing, and there they are with nothing. And they're starting to starve. And so Jesus asks them in verse 5, how many loaves do you have? Somehow they still had 7 loaves. Where they found them, I don't know. I would have thought they'd eaten them by now, but they still had them. And so Jesus directs the people to sit down on the ground, and he takes the 7 loaves, and he gives thanks. Great picture, Jesus taking the loaves and praying, saying grace, as we call it today. He gives thanks, he breaks the bread, he starts giving them to the disciples, they serve the people. And they also had a few small fish, 3, 4. And again, Jesus blesses them, and he orders these to be served as well. So try to picture that. 5, 6, 7,000 people. People as far as you can see. And way down, somewhere in the middle of that crowd, there is a man, and his hands are moving, and he's handing things out. And he doesn't stop. I mean, how long did that take? I have no idea. And he just keeps handing it out. Fish and bread, fish and bread. It's been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, and he's still doing it. How does he do that? And the people that are closest to him, the ones in the know, they know he's only got 7 and a few, but he never stops. They just keep going out. And some people evidently finish, and they get seconds. This is remarkable. How does that work? And he just keeps handing it out. Anybody need more? Well, I've already had 2 servings now. We get you covered. Here. Where does that come from? And you look around, and there's nothing but desert. And you know there was only 7 and a few, and yet this guy who feels compassion just keeps handing it out. It's crazy. How does that work? And what's even more remarkable, verse 8 says, and they ate and were satisfied. So we're not talking about rations here. We're talking full-blown, kind of a 3-course meal feeling. I mean, these people are burping. They ate well. I mean, they just kept eating like it was their last meal. And it wasn't. The next meal was right there. And they ate and were satisfied. And then they picked up 7 large baskets. Greek has different words describing different kinds of baskets, and this is the word for, obviously, the large basket. This is the word used in Acts 9 when Paul was let down over a wall in a basket. So it's big enough for a human being. I don't know how tall Paul was, but big enough for somebody to get in it and be let down over a wall by ropes. This is a pretty, my mother, when I was a kid, she used to hang the clothes. I don't know if anybody hangs clothes outside anymore, but my mother had this big laundry basket. And I think of that every time I read this. I could have got in that thing as a kid. Probably still could. It was a big basket. And that's the word he uses here. And remember, they started with 7 loaves, and now they've got 7 large baskets of broken pieces. Are you kidding me? Broken pieces? How much space does a broken piece of bread take? And then multiply that to fill a basket, multiply that to fill a large basket, maybe as big as this podium here, fill that thing right up, and then do it 6 more times. That's a lot of bread. Imagine being there, just sitting there thinking, I can't believe what I see here. This can't be happening. How does he do that? Now, they should have known because a couple of chapters earlier, he did this before. Back there, he fed the 5,000 plus the women and children. So that was greater than this. This is just 4,000 men with women and children. So if he did the greater, you kind of wonder why anybody's wondering about him doing the lesser. It's really not that hard if you can do one to do the other. Verse 8, and when they were satisfied, they picked up 7 large baskets full of what was left over of the broken pieces, and about 4,000, and we know from Matthew's gospel, men with women and children were there, and he sent them away, and immediately he entered the boat with his disciples and came to the district of Dalmathua. So I started this morning by having you focus on Jesus and how he might respond to you in whatever you're going through sitting here this morning. And I want to end the same way. I want to end by again focusing on Jesus and how he might respond to you in what you're going through this morning. And so the first thing I want you to notice about this story before us is when we're concerned about our own circumstances and our own limitations, Christ is concerned about people and their needs. That's a great example for us to follow. But it can be challenging, I know. Because when I'm in a difficult spot, when I'm as needy as these people were, it's really easy for me to panic. It's real easy for me to anticipate everything that can go wrong and all the reasons why something can't be done. But to live in faith and to believe that Christ can pull off, yes, the impossible, that's challenging. And so I, for one, am greatly encouraged by the knowledge that when I'm all wrapped up in my own circumstances and my own limitations, that Christ is concerned about people and their needs. He feels compassion. In fact, right now at this very moment, Christ is concerned about you and your needs. He feels compassion for you. And you need to know that. And secondly, when we have nothing left, Christ holds nothing back. As I said a moment ago, Matthew, being a tax collector, he sort of crunched the numbers on what was going on here. Mark doesn't get into that, but Matthew does. Matthew figured out roughly how many people were there, how much it would cost to feed each person. And he kind of multiplied all that. And he came up with this astronomical amount of money and even if we have the money, where are we going to buy it? There's nothing around here. And so Matthew had, kind of given up. Doing the math only hurts because it just goes to further prove this can't be done. This doesn't make any sense. But you know, as I was reading this passage, I did my own math. And I'm bad at math. I will admit that. But let me show you how I did this. I added 5 and 7. Now, those of you that are better at math than me, you do that. You add 5 and 7. And if you do it the way I did it, you'll come up with 9. Right? No. 5 and 7 doesn't add up to 9. Unless you do math the way Jesus does math. If you add verse 5, how many loaves do you have? 7. If you add that to verse 7, a few small fish, so we'll say 3, 5 and 7, it adds up to verse 9. About 4,000 were there, and he fed them and sent them away. You see, 5 and 7 doesn't add up to 9. Just like you can't feed this many people with that little bit of food unless you're Jesus. If you're Jesus, you can add 5 and 7 and come up with 9. You can take a few loaves of bread, a few fish, and feed thousands and thousands of people nonstop. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't work that way in the natural realm. I get that. But I could stand up here and regale you with stories of what Christ has done in my life when he had nothing to work with. Worse than that, sometimes he had to work with me. And yet somehow, he just kept doing it. And I was shocked and amazed. And I'm still shocked and amazed. After all these years of him doing that, I'm still shocked when he does it again. Because he can't do that. It can't be done. No one can do that. But he did it. He brought that kid back. He paid that bill. He put that marriage back together. He got that job. He got him through that sickness when it shouldn't have been able to be done. But he did it. And he did it again and again and again. I try not to be too hard on the disciples for their shock, because I'll tell you, I am more like them than I am different from them. I too would be shocked and surprised if I saw him doing that, even though he just did a greater thing just a few days, few weeks earlier. And so this leads me to my final point, which is really more of a promise than a point. Romans 8:32, he who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for us all, how will he not also with him, with his son, how will he not freely give us all things? If he does the greater, gives us his son, what's the big deal with him doing the lesser and freely giving us all things with him? What is the big deal? That's the easy part, giving us all things. The hard part is freely giving us his son. And so for those of you here this morning who have never considered the claims of Christ, you really haven't trusted in him yet, you're still thinking it over, good for you. But let me just ask you to consider the first half of that promise. He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for you. What's keeping you from trusting him? He's already given his son over for you. What are you waiting for? There is nothing else to give. Now it's up to you to believe, to trust, to put your faith in the person and work of Jesus Christ, because he's already delivered his son over for you. And for those of you who know Christ, personally, I would ask you to think about the second half of that promise. How will he not also with Christ freely give us all things? He's promised to meet all our needs. If he's done the greater, what's the big deal with the lesser? That's the easy part, kind of. So take courage from this promise in Romans 8 and be encouraged by this account, this story in Mark chapter 8. And remember that promise, especially in Romans 8, because it may very well be before the week is over, maybe before this day is over, that you might need to remind yourself of that. That he who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for you and for me, how would he not also, with Christ, freely give us all things? Let's pray. Father, we've only, I feel, begun to scratch the surface this morning. There's so much more in this account that we could delve into. We could look at it from so many different perspectives, the perspective of the people in the crowd, the perspective of the disciples who were talking with Jesus about how much they had. We could look at it from our perspective. What would we be thinking if we were there? But we try to just focus on the perspective of Christ, trying to look into his heart and mind. And when we do, we find compassion. And we find the kind of compassion that sees someone's distress and not only desires to alleviate it, but actually does. He feeds their hungry stomachs. So, Father, I doubt too many of us this morning are in that kind of a need for food. If anyone is, I pray, meet it maybe through us in some way. I don't know, but Father, for anyone here this morning, though, that has a different kind of hunger, a hunger for peace, a hunger for joy, a hunger for a restored relationship, a hunger just to sleep calmly at night, a hunger for some direction with a really difficult decision, a hunger for courage to get through the next week, maybe a hunger for God. Father, I pray you will meet that need through the Son whom you've already delivered over for us all. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Tim?